is about the self-care wheel, which I've given you. It's an existing tool, and I'm quite happy. I have made a tweak to it to show you at the end, but I'll take your feedback on how you feel that this would work for you guys to actually then use it as a tool for you to use with your end clients, end user. And self-care, I've just been talking to Catherine, for a lot of years we're conditioned not to put ourselves first because it would be selfish. So we still have this battle in our head that we can't put ourselves first, and actually we should, because we're only responsible for ourselves. If we took full responsibility for what we ate, drank, did, thought, it's up to us. So self-care to me is actually the most important thing about today. Self-care for you and to tell our people. And the reason it's into 6 different areas, because it's not about doing everything in each of these areas and thinking, oh God, I don't do that one, oh, I don't do any of that. It's about, I'll go through it, 5 minutes in each of the slots, we'll ask questions. It's about balance. It's not about doing everything in each of these slices of pie, if you like. It's about looking at it and thinking, I don't do anything like that. You know, professional, emotionally, physical, psychologically, spiritually and personal are all 6 areas that kind of, we need to be balanced. And if you do 2 things in each, then you're balanced. If you do 5 in one and none in another, then you're out of balance. But practicing self-care is a practice. We can't think, oh, I'm resilient now, I've done all this, I go to yoga and I'm quite mindful when I go for a walk and I know all about self-regulation, but if we don't practice self-care, the resilience will go. And I know it's easy to say it, but if we don't practice self-care, then we're never going to be at our best. We're never going to be at our optimum. We're never going to reach that self-actualization. If any of you knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it talks about being the best version of us. So I'll start off with professional, because it's the easiest one, and most people have either been in a full-time job or had a full-time career, or part-time, or maybe even retired now. But I'll start there. If you are working, no matter what job you do, even if it's voluntary, you still need to take time for lunch. You still need to set boundaries, and when I mean by boundaries are whatever that boundary is for you, so people don't take you for granted, so people don't misuse you. Boundaries are one of the hard things, and boundaries is hard. A good way of doing it is to actually tick. Yeah, work in progress is good. One of the great ways of using the tool is just to go through it and just mentally or tick either the ones you do, so you can look at it and go, yeah, I do them, or tick the ones you don't do. Depends on how your mind works. Do you want to tick the ones you do because it makes you feel good and you've achieved? Or do you want to tick things you don't do and you think, I need to work harder? So it's up to you. I like the ones that you can tick that you do, because you can then look and go, yeah, I do that, and then I can see the areas that I need to improve on. Right? It's up to you, but if you want, Lisa, tick the ones you don't do. Yeah? It works either way. What I don't want you to do is feel really bad at the end and go, I don't do any of that. That's not the point. It's just self-awareness and reflect. So boundaries are important, and don't work overtime. We're here once. Life's not a rehearsal. I've just been speaking to Catherine about, I've got a CEO, and he came to me 3 or 4 years ago, and he's worked really hard, worked hard at school, university, travel, built up a company, sold his company. At the end of it, his wife divorced him, didn't spend any time at home. He only sees 2 of his 4 kids and grandchildren, and he lives it's a nice property, but he's rented, it's not his, and he's lonely. So it's all relevant. Yes, we need money to live, but we don't need to work to live. We need to, we need to be able to live and enjoy life, whatever that looks like. Don't work any time off. We're all guilty of this. If it's urgent, you can then choose to do it. Take your holidays. This guy I'm talking about, he said, I never took my holidays. I paid for my wife. I paid for my wife and kids to go. But they want time with you. Take your holidays. Take mental health days. Looking after our mental health, if our resilience is low, and there'll be days when it's higher and lower, it is a movable thing. Resilience You know, if you've done a lot of self-care, you'll feel highly resilient. You can take on the world. You know, when you're feeling really well, you can move mountains. But when you're feeling low, and it could be trauma, could be different emotions, different hormones, but by practicing this and then giving yourself permission to do self-care, you will always have an element of resilience. So therefore, you'll always have some water in your well. Learn to say no. The power of no. Some opportunities are good and you might take on board all opportunities. But if you say no to some, to leave space for the really great ones. There's some really great opportunities, but you can't say yes to everything. I mean, yes, we can do anything, but we don't have to do everything. So that's another one when I started there, because I didn't do any of those. And that's why I struggled, because I didn't practice the self-care. So you might recognise some. So I've got one girl who does 50 hours, the contract's 15 and she's tired. So I said, well, why are you doing more than 15? She went, well, for more money. And I went, and do you need more money? She said, no. I said, so why are you doing it? And again, so you go, what's the evidence is good, but what is the underlying emotion? So if you're feeling guilty, you'll only feel guilty if you think it's your responsibility. If it's not your responsibility, then if you didn't feel a little bit guilty, then you're not human. But the boundaries are there. So they probably know that you'll say yes. So they will ask. Choose to work overtime because you are saving for a car. So this talks about, you know, it says do not work overtime. It's not telling you can't. It's when people think they have no choice. As soon as your choice is taken away, that's, you know, and same as Joe said, and then you go back and go, oh, you know, I'm going to get another job. They're taking advantage of me. I feel taken for granted. Then you look at the self-regulation of having the confidence to say, this goes back to self-esteem, self-confidence. To be resilient, we need high self-esteem as well. That's the other thing here. It's just a small thing. Because often we have to look at why we're doing it. And I know why I did it. I'm not saying it's why you did. But I also like to feel needed. I also wanted to feel wanted, and I also wanted to do a good job. So as long as we accept that and we reflect and go, actually, it made me feel good doing those extra hours. Because I want to be affirmations. I want somebody to go, thank you for that, Carol. Thank you. So that could be why you're saying yes. So as long as you know and you can understand your emotions. So under professional is leave work at work, it's easier said than done as well, but it's, again, this is a practice. So self-care is ongoing. Self-care doesn't stop. And we might get better at saying no. Boundaries don't create themselves initially. You might go, oh, they've stepped. Have you heard the term when they've overstepped the mark? That means they've overstepped your boundaries. But your boundaries could be here, or you could have, you could have really huge boundaries. And they can flex dependent on where you are in terms of your water butt. I didn't draw the water butt. I'm used to having my water butt and I haven't drawn it, so I can't point. So it's absolutely okay to say no if you're really low on water. Absolutely, because you're responsible for you. What you can't do is you're really running on low, your boss asks you to come in, you go on empty, then you're poorly for 3 days. You can't blame them. You can't say it's your fault. You've made me work. You've chosen to work. So self-reflection and self-regulation is, actually, I don't feel right good today. I need to recharge my batteries. I need to top up my well. Yeah? Self-care is knowing. Yeah? So this self-care tool, it's a tool, is to practice self-care, taking all the other elements in. And I know I've simplified it in here, but it's based on all the other stuff. Yeah? So we've done professional. Okay, we move on to emotional. This goes back to the self-esteem and you've done well. Affirmations. Even if we say them to ourselves, we are enough as we are. We don't have to change. Self-love. We've talked about self-love here. People have to like and love themselves enough to take care of themselves. If you're a carer, it's very easy for me to say you should take care of yourself first, but if you're caring for a dementia husband or wife, you then think all your energy's got to look after them. But then that's not long term, that's not great, because you're going to suffer. So you have to look after you first. You're responsible for you. All of the other stuff and the other help we can, but you need to have self-compassion and self-love for you. In emotional purpose, we can cry. Crying is a release of emotion. So to cry and to laugh. How often do we find we haven't laughed that day? Children laugh hundreds of times a day. Us humans, probably around 7. Which is really sad. We need more fun. We need more laughter. And that creates the joy, and the joy about being in the present moment, you know, being childlike, not childish, childlike is really important. So watch a funny movie, that'll help you laugh. That's dopamine. We need dopamine to make us laugh. Find a hobby, something you're good at, because that will give you that self-esteem. We're building self-esteem for resilience. We need to do that. Cuddle with your pet. We talk about, you know, a calming a pet, whether it's a cat, a dog, a gerbil, a rabbit, to cuddle your pet. Now, people have said to me, I haven't got a pet. Remember, it's not about doing all of these. It's about looking at which ones, any of these ones will help your emotional state. So you might think, well, I do 3 of those. That's not a bad start. I mean, there's 10 or 13 in each of these slices of pie. Practice forgiveness. Now, this is forgiveness of others. So if there's someone hurt you in the past, it's learning to get that emotion out. So you might have some anger, you might have some resentment, you might have some, even from our childhood, things in our past. So to practice forgiveness, and you might think, well, they don't deserve it. I don't want to forgive them, they hurt me, but you deserve it. You deserve the forgiveness. It's like having poison and you drinking it and expecting the other person to die. Anger held in is not good. Showing anger and being able to do conflict management is healthy. Yeah? I'm angry that Boris made me stop cuddling my friends, but it didn't stay long. But I was angry when I heard that news. I was angry that my holidays got cancelled, but I didn't try and hide it or go, oh, it's okay, I'm fine, while bubbling underneath. I really need a holiday. So emotions need to be processed. There's no solution to an emotion. So often we treat emotions as problems that we need to find a solution for, and emotions have to be processed. It's a healthy way of doing it. So a lot of your people on the end of the phone or when you're face to face will have emotions. Don't try and fix them. Don't try and give them an answer, because they just need to process that emotion. The very fact that you're there with empathy, with listening, and that you're real interest is often enough. So that's emotional. I'm going to move quickly on to physical. Physical resilience is as important, because if you're physically fit and you're physically okay, you'll become more emotionally resilient. So exercise. Now, exercise doesn't mean spending 5 hours at the gym. Exercise just means move more. It could just be a walk. Just get enough sleep. Just say 7 to 9 hours. But it's about the quality of sleep. 7 hours might be right for you. But if you're always waking up tired, then look at it and think, am I getting enough sleep? So the physical self-care, and I put on here, ask for a hug. I should have a caveat, not during COVID-19. But you can self-hug. You could self-hug or hug your pet or hug the people you live with. Hugging releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is another good hormone that we need. We need to have that to make us feel good. Take holidays. Now holidays, people say, oh, I can't afford 2 weeks abroad. A holiday could be a weekend. It could be a day trip to Cleethorpes. It's a change. You're doing something different. It takes you out of rehearsing the future. So being in the present moment and doing something different will build different neural pathways. So that's why that's underneath there on physical. Regular medical care. It's one of the hard things that's going to happen in a few years, where people have not gone to the doctors because A, they were scared, B, they tried but they couldn't get through, C, they've not had as many appointments. So the regular medical care is still important under physical. We just have to keep going to the doctors, keep our regular care, keep our dentist appointments, our doctor's appointments, our MOT. Take a walk, just a walk, and take time off. Just taking 5 minutes to reset in a day could just be enough for you. I mean, I love bubble baths, but not everybody loves bubble baths. So I'm not saying you have to have a bubble bath, but you might want a mindful shower. Just feel the water, smell the shower gel, just feel and just be in that moment. the present moment. If we could step off automatic pilot a lot more and just be in the moment, our emotional state and our physical state would be much better. Because under physical, we're also looking at things like our blood pressure, our inflammation, so if we eat well, and when I say eat well, it's about not dieting. I don't diet anymore. It's about having the balance. What does your body need? Just balanced. Moving on to psychological, so this is where some of these things come in, which is why I like this tool, because under psychological, we absolutely need self-reflection. We're often too busy to take time to look back, but we do need just to take that few moments a day to reflect. Therapy, don't see therapy as a negative. Practice asking for and receiving help, we talked about. That's a good way of having a high emotional intelligence, is knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at, and knowing it's okay to ask. Read a self-help book. There's some good ones, there's some brilliant ones, and there's some not so good, but you'll find the ones you like. Reading, I like reading. Again, self-awareness is the ability to know what it is that you need. Often we're too busy because we're avoiding certain thoughts. Distraction is okay. That's what this is saying. You can relax in the sun, garden, read a book. Distraction's okay because it helps reduce the intensity of that emotion. But avoidance of things that's happened isn't. And sometimes with what we're talking about in the diagnosis is sometimes we don't want to think about it because it's too painful. So we just need to ask for help and think about your positive qualities rather than think about the things that you're not good at. Think about the things that you are good at. It'll build your self-esteem, it'll build your self-confidence, which will make you more resilient. And join a support group. The support groups are a great way of like-minded people. You are there for the same reasons. It's probably a shared experience. And a support group could be, we talked earlier about the empowered by nature. It's a really great support group. You know, the Aurora itself offers that support. That's under the psychological. But again, from there is sensory, touch, engage, draw, paint, whatever it is that you like to do. You might think, oh, I only do 2 out of there. It's about balance. Then moving to spiritual. And I'll always caveat this bit with, you can be religious. A lot of people are, and they go to church and they pray. And if you're not religious, as long as you have this spiritual freedom will help you become more resilient. It's the knowledge that there's something greater than us. So spiritual freedom more than a religion, because a lot of the religions say you have to follow mine and yours is wrong. And I don't like that. It's whatever suits you. There is no wrong religion, it's what's right for you. So I call it spiritual freedom, to follow whoever you want to follow. But belonging to church or a choir is still, it will help build your resilience. It's the freedom to be who you want to be. Self-cherish goes back to self-care. So if we want to call it self-cherish, I'm going to put that there, because we have to again cherish who we are, love ourselves, like ourselves. Volunteer for a cause. It always makes us feel good if we volunteer. That's why we volunteer, because it helps us on a spiritual level, because we all want to give something back. And so, you know, it does make us feel good. That will also build your self-esteem. We're giving something back with no expectation. When we go to work, we expect a wage. When we volunteer, we don't. Go into nature. Nature is brilliant. You've got the trees, you've got the fact that the trees kick out oxygen that we need, and they need carbon dioxide. I haven't put it on here, but there's a great Japanese self-care activity called Shinrinyuku. It's called forest bathing. It's becoming, again, things come into fashion and go out. It's a bit like, you know, we've talked about this earlier, Catherine, about using the word mindfulness. It's been, I think, overused now, and people think it's a panacea, but forest bathing is mindfulness in the forest. It's about sitting there and being and listening and smelling and touching and just being. We're a human being, not a human doing. Sunsets. How many people love watching the sunset? You know, on holiday, capture the sunset. But every day the sun sets, it will rise again the next day. So under spirituality, that spiritual freedom will build resilience. Play with children. Children have this enormous capacity to laugh, to see things for the first time. They have a beginner's mind, so play with children. If you haven't got your own, borrow some. Or be around children. Children will make you laugh. Or watch video clips, which is quite amusing. Dance. To dance to music. You know, music, play, sing. All those things are spiritual. And yoga is quite spiritual, so yoga, a lot of people. And self-forgiveness here. So whereas on the psychological was forgiveness of others, self-forgiveness in a spiritual way is not the blame. So whatever we've done in our past, whatever mistakes we've made, if we call them mistakes, I just think it's learning, first attempt in learning. But foster self-forgiveness, whatever it is that you've done. And this is probably the hardest one, because again, we sold this dream when we're younger. You behave yourself, you work hard, you go to school, you go to university, you get a good job, you earn lots of money, and then. So it's about learn who you are, self-reflection. Figure out what you want in life. You know, do you want to travel? Do you want to spend time with a hobby? It's raining. Plan short-term and long-term goals. And this is different from rehearsing the future. This is more when you're rehearsing things in your head, catastrophizing or mind reading or predicting the future. It's okay to plan. It's okay to have things in your diary. And one of the reasons the pandemic was so difficult was we couldn't plan anything. There was so much uncertainty. Whatever we planned, it might get cancelled. So it was like, there's no point in doing that because it's going to be cancelled. So a lot of anxiety is caused by wanting things to be different. So if we're in the present moment and we accept things as they are, whether they're good or bad feelings, we talk about anger and sadness as bad feelings, I just say it's a feeling. It's not good or bad, it's just, and anger is not a bad emotion, it's still an emotion. It's okay to be angry, just don't stay angry. Learn to play an instrument. Spend time with family, as long as you like your family. If you don't, then spend time with friends who you treat as family. It's okay to have some difficulties, but that goes back to the emotional intelligence, which is about the relationship management. You can look at that from a family perspective and family dynamics, conflict management, inspiring. So under personal, you don't have to do something because your parents want you to do. You don't have to be the person you think your sister wants you to be. Learn who you want to be. Be responsible for you. And just relax. Foster friendships. I know people make a vision board, but that's again personal choice because they're quite a visual person. And have it in your office. Have a vision board of where you want to be. Have a goal. So in the emotional intelligence model, that's service orientation, and it talks about achievement. I think it's called achievement orientation. Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? Get out of debt. That's easier said than done, but if you've got a money worry and you're worrying about the future, that can cause anxiety. So try and tell my daughter that one with a university loan, but hey ho, it'll come, but she's working on it. So that's the self-care wheel as a tool, as it is. And it covers those 6 areas: emotional, psychological, spiritual, personal, physical. Self-care can also make us more mindful. By doing things in the self-care wheel will make us more mindful. And under spiritual, it does talk about meditation. So that goes both ways. So that can create emotional intelligence. Self-care can also create us to be more mindful, and it encourages to meditate. People's self-care toolkit will be whatever their toolkit looks like. So all these things, there is no one route to achieving emotional resilience. But resilient people have certain traits. So if I talk about the model you have now is about the certain traits of being resilient. We've covered a lot of them doing the mindfulness meditation, which is on the left-hand side, because mindfulness creates self-awareness, self-reflection. It allows you to not rehearse the future as much, might never stop it altogether. And it also gives you a choice to step off automatic pilot. So to become resilient, you need to be able to do that. some of the tools. The emotional regulation we've talked about, which is on the resilience. So self-regulation, emotional regulation. Spiritual freedom. You need to have the spiritual freedom to become resilient. So we've talked about how that happens by looking at our spirituality, by looking at what we do in a self-care perspective, will create the spiritual freedom. We also look on the emotional resilience as coping strategies. We talk about positive coping strategies. So they're not over drinking, they're not smoking, because that's generally a self-care strategy, but it's not always a healthy one. But it's still a coping strategy, whether we gamble, smoke. And once you become aware, and you can do the exercise that you did, Lisa, is what's the thought? Where am I coming from? And we can unravel that thought process. We'll create better habits. And by creating better habits, we'll create more resilience. Yeah? And the flexibility that's on there is about cognitive flexibility. And to me, the cognitive flexibility is the emotional intelligence. It's the ability to know what to do with the information we have. So cognitive flexibility is so not to do the same thing for everybody. It's the flexibility to think of different ways. So self-care is very personal. So cognitive flexibility makes you resilient as well. Strong relationships. If you're going through a tough time, you need to have strong relationships, whether it's family or friends. So part of the self-care we talked about was foster friendships, be part of a support group. So all the self-care activities will build that strong relationships, because you'll find them through a common cause, church, therapy groups, support groups, working together on a volunteer basis. All the things from self-care will build the strong relationships that these people are saying you need to be resilient. I'm conscious I've rushed through that bit, but that model is, to me, encapsulates everything that we've done. It's about being aware, self-awareness, self-regulation, self-reflection, practicing certain things. You don't have to always be mindful, because that would be, you wouldn't go through life thinking, oh, I think I'll cook tea. I'm now going to go and feel that pan. I'm now going to put that pan on the stove. It's unrealistic to be mindful all the time, but it's a choice to step off automatic pilot. If you step off automatic pilot, you'll have more time in the present moment. If you practice self-care, you'll create a more mindfulness approach. It encourages you to meditate, which also has its benefits. With emotional intelligence, it's like a recipe. Develop the two skills. There's two skills. Emotional intelligence and mindfulness is a skill. This is a practice. So if you can see the two sides of the board, gain the skills, and by practicing, you'll gain the skills. So that leads in both ways to leave you with the emotional resilience. I have created a tool, put together the self-care element to practice. I've put the emotional intelligence around the top because it's kind of a nice thing to have to increase your intelligence in emotional intelligence, and I've put the mindfulness and meditation around the bottom. So if that would work, or I'll accept feedback on how else could we use the self-care wheel as a tool to create emotional resilience. Show how you practice self-care, how you develop the skills whilst doing the self-care, and if that would work for you, then I can create that. Say, obviously this is a really advantageous thing to develop. You're developing your own self-care toolkit. So by developing it's important that it's their self-care toolkit. What you can share is, these are some positive coping strategies, such as meditation, such as getting out for a coffee with a friend, making sure you learn to say no. That a lot of these are positive coping strategies. So,
and presumably you'd go through these suggestions, or not suggestions, but you'd talk through them as a discussion. but they'd put their own things in, wouldn't they? So they'd say,
Yes.
well,
They have their own examples
yeah,
of how
they'd
they
fill their
would.
own in basically
Yeah,
to follow,
yeah.
wouldn't they?
It's
Yeah.
just as I'm sure we've all been doing, listening to that, filling our own gaps in
Yes.
with our own experiences.
Until you talk to that person, you don't know which bit's out of balance.
Absolutely.
So it might be that you ask them and go, so which area, and ask them, so which area do you think you've got the most in? Start with a positive, and they go, well, I do this, and I go for a walk. And then ask the other question, which area would you like to improve on? Not what we think you need to improve on, but I'd say, so Catherine, you know, looking at the wheel, which of those areas? And then they'll say one of two things. Well, all of them, which is very rare, but very rare. Most people go, well, I need to work on my emotional and actually my professional one. The work one often comes up. I haven't got any boundaries. Consistent tool that you're giving or using, and you will be guided by that person, but because that covers all the areas, it gives them, it empowers them, and that's what you're looking for. The emotional resilience is, you know, yes, we can listen, yes, it's bad news, yes, you can focus on that, and some people want to talk. Some people want to talk for hours before they make any action. I think your job is, yes, absolutely listen, empowering them by saying, have you thought about this? These are the words. Have you looked at this tool? And if you've got the opportunity and the chance to talk, you know, that is a great tool that they can take away and come back, and the self-reflection is you actually helping them reflect. Because you want the non-judgment, they want you to listen, they want to be able to share it without making them feel guilty. They want some support if they want to know where to come. They want to know what they can help themselves with. Some won't. Some will want you to do everything for them. That you will come across that, because this goes back to they can blame everybody else and it's not their fault. But the outcome of resilience is the same, because whatever fear factor they've got, whether the fear of dying, fear of cancer, fear of, you know, being killed in an accident, it's the same set of emotions, the same thought pattern, the same. We've all got our autonomic nervous system, but it depends on our childhood, depends on what our triggers are. But so the tool is a tool. It's like sharing a recipe. You might never get to showing them how to cook it. You might only ever just share the recipe. But they'll only become resilient by the action.